If you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked on occasion because you were being brave, I am not interested in or open to your feedback about my work. Period. That was said by the very wise Brené Brown in her Netflix special, which I highly encourage that you watch, called A Call to Courage. She covers, all things beautiful about living vulnerably and painful, actually, because they go hand in hand. And so with all of that today, I'm going to talk about dreams to expand on some of the things I was touching on in my last episode, where I talked about how one of the ways that we can sort of unlearn the patterns associated with ruminating on the behavior of narcissists or the nerve of those who've abused or harmed us is to instead become aware and then shift the conversation to our own imaginations and our own dreams. And I thought it would be helpful to just give a little bit more detail about how we do that and why dreams matter and how it all connects to this quote from Brené Brown. Because the beauty of the thing is that talking about our dreams and imaginations and our plans is not about the narcissist, right? It's not, oh, this is just my way to escape a negative pattern. It becomes its own beautiful creature and beautiful lifestyle and something completely separate from anything that abusers will ever know or experience, and something that's yours, something that you can build, something that it's its own. And I just want to share how to do that today. But before I do, I thought I would drop a couple resources in case you were interested in some of the things that I briefly touched on in the last episode. And one of them is that I mentioned that when I read Michelle Obama's The Light We Carry book, and I talked about how she alluded to the three sisters, right? And how she planted one of those gardens at the White House. And I was talking about how interesting and perhaps restorative our culture in the United States would be if we actually started taking some of the indigenous practices seriously. And if there's an, ethical and culturally appropriate way to implement some of them, what it might do to our country in very positive ways. And so on that note, if you're curious about learning more about the three sisters, I've learned about them in two separate places, and a really good resource in general is the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Native author Robin Wall Kimmerer. She talks a lot. She has kind of this beautiful blending of like the science of botany, right, and plants and studying that, along with her native roots and what she learned about plants and the earth and growing things. And she talks about the three sisters in that book, and the importance of how corns, bean, and squash, the three sisters grow together. But she doesn't just talk about that. She talks about lots of plants from, the United States and the earth in general, and how growing them is supposed to be sustainable. And it's a really beautiful read. And if you are somebody who needs something a little bit quicker, like you sometimes might get lost if literature goes a little bit too deep or a little too long, especially when it comes to the science and spirituality of plants. I also want to share that she has a young adult version of the book too, that's a little bit easier to follow and has some really good like short snippets in there and everything. So you can also check out the young adult version. So again, the author is Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it's called Braiding Sweetgrass. It's been around for a couple of years, so it's likely that you've already heard of it. Another really, really good resource if you're looking to just build some healthier cultures is also Dan Buettner's work. He is a researcher for National Geographic, and he's very well known for his work with the blue zones, which I also alluded to. And the blue zones are the 5 areas of the world where people are living the longest, healthiest lives. And he's done a lot of really beautiful work also with local governments that I've been mentioning, with trying to sort of revitalize communities to learn from these blue zone lifestyles. And I'm no surprise, the things that help human beings live the longest, healthiest lives our community, right? Feeling connected, growing and tending their own food, right? Because it's free of, a lot of those chemicals and preservatives that can lead to so many health problems later in life. Feeling like they have a sense of purpose, that's a big one. And there's a couple others too that just have a lot to do with, general exercise, faith, lots of different things. And so he has a documentary on Netflix called Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones, and I highly recommend watching it. He actually goes to all 5 of these blue zones, and as well as some communities that are starting to develop some of this blue zone lifestyle. And he interviews actual folks who are experiencing this sort of beautiful lifestyle, and it's just a really, really well done documentary. So I highly recommend that. And he does actually talk about the 3 sisters there too when he travels to Nicoya, Costa Rica. And so it's not just North American indigenous groups who learned this idea of the 3 sisters and growing corns, bean, and squash. It actually, extends into South and Central America too. So anytime, an idea is practiced in multiple places and found to have health benefits in multiple places, it's pretty reliable. It's a pretty good resource to know that whatever that practice is probably effective. So I highly recommend you check out those resources if you're looking for everyday ways that you can create a healthier, happier community, because that has been some of the focus of our conversation. So I thought I would give a few more practical resources from experts who have knowledge that extends way beyond mine, but also whose knowledge I've come to express incredible gratitude for. So again, Braiding Sweetgrass and Secrets of the Blue Zones, really, really good resources. Pretty much all libraries have Braiding Sweetgrass, so if you don't have the money to order it online or something like that, I can almost guarantee you that it will probably be at your local library. Now, that being said, I would like to share some of the knowledge that I do have about dreams. And when I say dreams, I'm not necessarily referring to those we have when sleeping, right? I'm referring to our imaginations. In the last episode, when I talked about how one of the greatest ways to stop talking about negative, unhealthy patterns is to then shift and talk instead about the things that you're dreaming of building, I wanted to make the point that kind of becomes a lifestyle. And so the best dream that I have to talk about is my writing. And I want to make this point very clear that when it comes to dreams, and I'll share about my writing, I think a lot of times we think of them in terms of achievements, right? Like I have a dream of winning this award someday. I have a dream of, running this many miles or completing this marathon, or I have a dream of having this many kids or buying a home in this place or whatever it might be, or getting my MBA or something like that. Those are all beautiful, but I think the danger of tying our dreams to achievements alone puts their value in the external. So I'm going to say that again. I think the danger of tying our dreams to achievements is it puts their value on the external, meaning that they only matter, they're only relevant if we get some kind of accolade for it and if other people approve of it. Now, it feels wonderful to win awards, right? And to get those achievements. I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't be proud. We absolutely should. We should celebrate that. But dreams have to go deeper, because if you only put the value of dreams on achievement, they can't take that internal, powerful meaning for you. And to go back to Brené Brown's quote about the arena and kind of dissect that a little bit, I can give you some more ideas about what I mean. Again, what she said was, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked on occasion because you were being brave, I'm not interested in or open to your feedback about my work, period. Here's the thing, when you create something innovative and groundbreaking, people are going to judge the hell out of you, right? People are going to have a lot to say. And Brené Brown was specifically referring to all the online hate that she got after her TED Talk that she did on vulnerability that just went viral and, you know, attracted millions and millions of views. And of course, also that means haters, right? People were commenting on her weight and just, you know, really going for the low blows and being assholes, right? As people on the internet do. And, you know, here's this brilliant, powerful woman who was obviously, as any human being would be, very hurt by that. And so she kind of had to go through this work of like, what do I do with that, right? Because there's the other thing where if you get big, even if you make something successful, people are going to judge you, especially if they're not being brave themselves. You know, Brene Brown also calls it the cheap seats, right? Like people commenting on the internet and criticizing what other people are doing from their anonymous phones or their anonymous computers where nobody has to look at them. That's really easy and a really cheap thing to do, right? To just criticize somebody else's work when you're not out there yourself. And so Brene Brown is making the point that like the best thing to do when you are creating something or living your dream is to be careful about who you take feedback from. You know, and if it's not people who are putting themselves out there as well, if it's people who don't know the risks of vulnerability, the people who aren't willing to put themselves out there, then they have no business criticizing people who do. And so, you know, that could be a whole episode in itself. I mean, Brene Brown has her Netflix special, which I highly encourage you to watch, where she dives into that more deeply. And so I'm having this thing right now where I'm trying to explain so many big concepts that I'm kind of like getting lost in a few of them and losing my center. So let me come back to my center again, which is what dreams mean to us. And again, those dreams are like what you value, what you create, what you want to build. So I'm going to pause and I'll circle back to the whole feedback thing and who we share our dreams with at the end. I'll maybe close with that. But for now, for me, like I said before, my dreams have a lot to do with my writing. Right? Like they have a lot to do with the poems I write, the stories I write, all of that. And I want to sort of debunk this impression that you have to be on your way to achievement and you have to be perfect to live your dreams. I want to like sort of dispel this whole myth that like our dreams have to be tied to achievement, where I would argue that they're more tied to lifestyle than anything else. And I've got a couple stories to kind of explain more about what I mean. So I wrote my first novel, Sheltered. It took me about, I want to say, 3.5 years total to write. And I started writing that book when I was a single mom. And I had just had a baby by myself. And I was on maternity leave, and I was really sad. You know, as much as I loved my baby and I had a couple other kids at that time, I was really lonely, you know. I didn't want to be alone, right? I wanted a partner, as many of us do. And I also, like many of us, was extremely frustrated with the dating game and being hurt and all that stuff. And I actually started crying in the shower. You know, I had all the hormones of, you know, postpartum kind of working in my favor to make me feel extra distraught at the time too. And I started crying in the shower, and I realized, you know what? I have a story to tell. And so after I got out of the shower, I thought, like, I got to have a place for this pain. I got to have a place for this frustration. And I just started writing my first novel. And that novel came out of, like, me crying in the shower. And what it is it's realistic fiction, right? It's not like a memoir or anything, but it's about two people who are finding where they belong and who they belong with, both experiencing incredible loss, but also incredible love and self-discovery and recovering from some of, you know, life's greatest hurdles. So, but I wrote that novel while also taking care of an infant. I wrote that novel sporadically, right? Like I didn't sit down and just pound out the whole thing. It took me a few years, and that's because I had periods of time where I stopped writing it, you know, because it was also work. Rarely did I sit down to my computer and go, all right, yep, I'm ready. To be honest, writing is a little bit like working out for me, where it's like I don't really feel like it, just like you might not feel like going to the gym or going for a run. But then after the fact, you're always really, really glad that you did. That's sort of what writing is like for me sometimes. I don't always feel like it, but I would write anyway. And a friend of mine at the time, who was also a writer, when I would speak to him and be like, oh, I just really I don't feel like doing this. I don't want to. And he kind of set me free in a way by saying, well, just write a sentence, just write a paragraph, just, who cares? Like, just write what you can and be okay with that. And that was very freeing to me because I didn't feel this pressure to sit down and write 7 pages a day. I got that freedom to kind of, just write down what I could in the moment, which I had to, right? Like I had 3 kids and eventually had to go back to a full-time job. And so there were seasons where like I didn't write for months and then I would come back to it. And that's kind of how dreams are. You don't have to tell yourself, oh, I didn't stick with it. I didn't stick with my plan. So what? Come back to it. My book was still waiting for me. It was right there. And who knows, maybe what I had learned in that 3 or 4 months or however long it was while I stepped away from it, maybe some of those lessons were exactly what I needed to bring back to it to make it what it was meant to be. So with that lesson, I want to say you don't have to live your dreams perfectly. I wanted to publish a novel, right? And I did not write that perfectly. It came out of me crying in the shower, but it also is something that I sometimes gave up on and had to come back to. Sometimes I was really productive and I did write 7 pages in a row. Sometimes I just wrote a sentence. And then slowly that habit that I told you about of just not letting my thoughts go kind of came out of that. So something that started as just a way to keep me motivated then became a general practice that gave me some of my most golden thoughts because I recorded them as I had them. And I met my husband while I was, and I mean like my second husband, the one who I'm with now. I met my husband while I was in the middle of writing that book, and I hadn't shared it with anyone. And the reason I hadn't shared it with anyone is because I didn't think anybody would take me seriously. But I fell in love with him for many reasons, and one of them is that he always made me feel safe to live my dreams because he believed in me. And the way that he believed in me was actually listening to my ideas. And he has this very artful way of sort of speaking life into the things I believe in and making me believe that they could come alive, in ways I never imagined. And so after I met my husband, I kind of just took off with my novel because he believed that it could become something. And I just got better at the practices that I was doing before. And when it comes to these practices, when I would write, it literally was just a matter of changing habits, right? So for a while, I actually deleted my social media because we all know how we can get caught up in scrolling. Instead of scrolling, I literally deleted my social media so I couldn't even go on it. And every time I would sort of feel that itch, that need to like open up the app and scroll, I instead would open up my computer and write a few sentences. During nap time, like when my kids were sleeping, instead of turning on the TV and binging my favorite show, I would open my computer. And when I was driving and I got an idea, instead of just kind of ignoring it and moving on, if it was safe to do so, I would pull over and write it down before I forgot. And that is one way that our dreams become our lifestyle. And what slowly started to happen over time is that I started to live in a way where I realized that I had a lot of creative ideas that mattered. And I started to feel excited about my ideas. It started to become art, right? It started to become, like a musician when they hear a song in their head and they got to record it. It was like, okay, this is art. I got to get this. I got to add this. It became, for me, a personal masterpiece. And then I published it. And what's funny is I remember where exactly I was when I wrote that last sentence of my first novel, Sheltered. I was in my bed and I was on spring break from teaching, and I wrote the last sentence and I was so excited. I felt that. I was like, okay, oh my God, I did it. But then I had this strange feeling that I wasn't done. That wasn't all that I was meant to write. So I took my first novel very seriously and went through the whole publishing process. And now, of course, you can buy it wherever books are sold, but you can also definitely take a look at it on my website, lovingcreatively.com. But when I finished writing that sentence, I had to ask myself, okay, I accomplished that goal I had. I met my goal. I've always wanted to write a novel, and I wrote a novel. So what am I going to do now? Am I going to let that just be that, just the book that it's supposed to be? Or am I going to keep writing? Am I going to see what I have to write next? No surprise, I wanted to keep writing. And I did. And what started as realistic fiction, when I started writing, I thought, the fantasy genre is my favorite, right? Like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, all that kind of stuff. I love those books. My favorite book series, or one of them actually, is the Books of Pelennor by Alison Croggon, also a very beautiful fantasy series. I remember my husband telling me, oh yeah, you should write fantasy. And I'm like, I'm not a fantasy writer. Like, I love to read it, but I'm not. But what kind of started to happen, as I continued to just write and get new story ideas, is I eventually discovered that I kind of was a fantasy writer, and so it's kind of like one project sort of spiraled into another. And although I thought I was a realistic fiction writer, soon, like just by, again, listening to what was going on in my mind and these ideas I was getting, I discovered that I could write in the magical realism genre. And that's what my two novellas, Monsters and She Death's Reflection, are about. They're this dance, It's this cool, like, transition from the magical to the real world, to poetry, to just regular prose and writing. I mean, it became its own piece. And I'm like, oh, I can write realistic fiction and I can write magical realism. Then I started uncovering some poems and journal entries that I wrote when I was lonely and down. And I was like, you know what? These are actually pretty good. And then reading my old poems kind of started inspiring me to write poems again. And just like anything, I'm a better writer, right? The more you do something, the better you get at it. And I was improving. It's a muscle that I was building. And I wanted to challenge myself and see what else that I could do. Now, as of now, I am not a best-selling author, right? And my publisher, they're wonderful, but they're not a big name publisher, They're for authors who are starting out, and I'm so grateful to them for giving me an opportunity. So I have 2 books right now that are officially published, and I'm self-publishing my newest one. And then I've got all the free short stories and stuff on my website. And I am living my dreams, although I do hope to have people read my work, right? Because I wrote it with the intention of trying to help make the world better. And I want to make enough money that I can move to the ocean, because y'all know how I feel about the Midwest. But really, my dreams became more about what I could do and who I was becoming, because any creator knows, whether you've built your own business or you write music or you create recipes or whatever it is, you kind of become your creations, right? Like, you go hand in hand. They're a part of you. They are you. You're connected in a really special way. So as I continued to write, my writing just became a part of me. It did not become achievement-based. The only way that it became maybe even slightly achievement-based is that I wanted to challenge myself. I was in competition with myself, and I wanted to see what I could do next. I wanted to dive deeper. I was becoming better, right? And I wanted to see what else I could do. It became a lifestyle. And now I've written so many stories, right? Like, I've written some real life nonfiction about some of my experience with love. And I wrote a superhero series called Fury. And it's meant to be empowering both to, I wanted to write a female superhero series where the hero was not put into boxes, right? Because if you've seen any superhero movies, you know that female characters often get put into boxes, right? Either they're the sexy, like, fighting, sassy, whatever, or they're the side character who's kind of smart, but really only there to be the quirky sidekick to the real hero. And I wanted to change that. And so you can also read Fury on my website for free, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I just released Volume 2 about a month ago. And, I'm writing about magic. I'm writing about powers. I never imagined I would do that when I began writing my realistic fiction novel. But that's kind of who I grew to be, just from changing some small habits every day, like writing during nap time, not scrolling so much, not binging so much, just pausing and putting some of my energy instead into my work. And so when it comes to our dreams, they become a part of us. They become the things that we talk about. And there is something incredibly empowering about talking about the things that I'm making, these characters that I'm dreaming up, these themes that I'm dreaming up. It's fun to talk about it. It's work, it's absolutely work to write it. I don't always feel like it, but my creations have become a part of me. And when you live in a world where you kind of shift the focus from talking about other people's bullshit to your own dreams, you become a person who is inherently happier and healthier because you're seeing your own potential and your own inner beauty rather than focusing on the shortcomings of others. And it does have a way of spilling into all areas of life. I could talk for hours about this, but I'm getting close to my end time. And so kind of the takeaway that I would like for you with this whole dreams thing is I hope you can see that by shifting just a couple habits, you can change your path. You can change the things that you talk about. You can remove power from those who are taking away your energy or trying to destroy your life. You can take that power back and focus instead on what you're making. One other habit that I changed, in addition to maybe not being on social media so much, maybe not watching so much TV, stopping myself when I found myself getting caught up in a conversation that was just leading to frustration. Another habit I changed was I stopped listening to gossip radio and instead started listening to podcasts, very much like this one, like on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, both free apps. And I started listening to people who were successful. I started listening to neurosurgeons. I started listening to people who were creating amazing things. Who you surround yourself with is also a very powerful indicator of what you are going to make. And I think sometimes we think who we surround ourselves with is just people like our family or our friends, but in a digital age, right, where we have access to so much on our phones or on TV or whatever, we are also surrounded by the people who we watch, the people who we listen to. All of that, directly affects our brains and what we think about and who we become. And the more that I just made the switch from, turning off gossip radio and instead listening to people like Ed Mylett, people like Jay Shetty, people like Brene Brown who are doing this groundbreaking, beautiful work, the more that I was inspired to do my own groundbreaking, beautiful work. And so for you, it can also just be the habit of, instead of listening to this, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to tune in instead to this and see how it might inspire me. It makes a difference. Your subconscious and it is always listening. And it does impact you, what you listen to. And so I'll repeat again the podcasts that have inspired me. I love On Purpose with Jay Shetty. I highly recommend that one if you're looking to make a change. That one is on iHeartRadio. I don't use Apple products, so I'm not sure. Probably it's on Apple stuff, but don't quote me on that because I don't know for sure. But I do know for sure it's on iHeartRadio. Ed Mylett's podcast, which is just called The Ed Mylett Show, is on Spotify, and you can find it there. And so I highly recommend if you're looking for something to tune into, that you tune into that. And so the last thing I want to end on, although I am going to do a separate episode about feedback and sharing some of the things that has happened to me with my writing and putting my dreams out there, I'll do a whole separate episode where I touch on just who we share our dreams with and why and when, and maybe who we, keep it to ourselves with. But before I end and create that new episode, I want to just go back to Brene Brown's quote again, which says, "If you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked on occasion because you are being brave, I'm not interested in or open to your feedback about my work, period." The purpose that I want to assign to that quote today is that our dreams are not necessarily about achievement, right? Because when it's just about what we do on the outside and we assign value to the reactions on the outside, it can lose its meaning for us, and we can be very sensitive to the critical feedback that others might have about it, and that can deter us sometimes from wanting to live our dreams. Our dreams are not just meant to be something for other people. They're not just meant to be something on the outside. They're meant to be for us. They're meant to be a guide for how we want to live our lives. And for me, a lot of my writing has been done privately. I don't necessarily put my stories out there right away. They're for me. They're something I do at my home. They're something I share with my husband and occasionally my kids. My stories are kind of for adults, so I don't really talk to them too much about it yet. But there's something I talk about with my husband. There's something I'll maybe talk about with my best friend. And there's something that I allow in, I allow my imagination. I allow my ideas to sort of mold who I am. I allow them to give me the peace and sort of intrinsic satisfaction that I used to seek from the outside world. Our dreams are not just meant to be about achievements. They're meant to be about what we are making. And there's so many beautiful ways that we can live those dreams, whether it's just planting that garden that you've been thinking about planting. I promise you, those plants and those seeds will become a part of you. Or if it's building a business, although you do need, right, the money coming from the outside, your business is still your own. It's still your creation. There are still parts of it that are yours. Maybe it's about your parenting. Maybe you are called to be an incredible example to your kids. Maybe finding artful ways to parent and studying up on that is your dream. Maybe who you're becoming as a parent is your dream. Maybe you want to teach dance. I have a very good friend who teaches my dance class, and she wanted to write her own choreography, and that became a special thing to her. So not just for, when we're all performing it, but became special to her, just the process of creating it. And so your dreams should be for you, and they're not just meant to be an escape from the evil people who would tear you down. They're meant to be a part of you. They're meant to be your lifestyle. They're meant to be what you think about, what you talk about, what you literally dream about at night. And it does something transformative to you. When you put your time and energy into what you were called to do, it comes back to you. It becomes a part of who you are. For me, it became something that I continued to challenge myself with. Like, oh, I wrote realistic fiction. Okay, now I do want to try fantasy. Ooh, now I want to get back into poetry. It became a part of me, and I was able to build on it. It wasn't just this one-time achievement and I'm done. I got better. I wanted to write more. I wanted to challenge myself in new ways. And when you're meeting, your own expectations and exceeding them, that's a very powerful thing because you're doing something for your own purposes. And I personally right now am working on getting to a point where I have a good sense of who to accept feedback from and whose comments to kind of let go. So with that, I want to encourage you, whatever it is that you're thinking about doing, take that step, maybe stop scrolling and write something down. Go for a run, and think about what it is that you want to build on. Make the switch, if you're looking to kind of stop listening to something that is kind of dragging you down, turn it off. Turn on something inspirational. We have a lot of power, a lot more than we think we do. I'm so grateful for your time, grateful for your energy, and have a beautiful day.